Thank you. Thank you very much, Vahe, and good morning to everybody. I hope that you had a nice rest last night. Let's jump straight into it. We have 3%. So Vahe is going to start with a discussion of human capital and the framework that's been developed at the Central Bank of Armenia. Evelyn Trong, we're always happy to get her to provide input into this. We're obviously looking for secrets from the Reserve Bank of New Zealand in terms of how they develop human capital. She's gone through a few of these things before, and in some cases we would like more elaboration and just to make sure that she's not holding out on us, and that she has some additional secrets there someplace. And then Asya is going to talk about this new project that we're starting with HICAS and AFI that builds a different version of Dynair Julia for monetary, fiscal, and macroprudential. And so this is going to be a special version of Dynair where it's focused more on building models for policy analysis versus models for academic work. And then finally, we'll have Archam, who was one of our interns, who has now set up an intern program with his school. So there will be about 5 of them interacting with us in the future. And of course, we have a very lively lineup of discussants. We've got Anush, who's responsible for all of our HR work in the department. And we have Shohei, Deanna, who are economists that work in the global forecasting school, and so on. And we have Levin, who's a board member. And Michelle Gilliard, who's here to support any interest that we might have in developing Dynair Julia to make it more compatible with the kinds of problems that we're solving in policymaking institutions. So I will leave it there and only say that I hope that this is my favorite session because it covers work-life balance issues. And I think what we've done in designing the framework, that it obviously means that FPAS Mark II is going to be something that is much more open to females as well as to males that basically want to practice good work-life balance issues. And so when you've done that, once you're making that decision, you have to realize that you've massively increased the pool of potential talent that you can access to develop these systems. So that's something that I think is really, really important for the development of FPAS Mark II, is that we have a tremendous advantage in the sense that it's much easier to teach people economics when we eliminate massive folly that's associated with developing baseline projections, and of course using linear approximations when the non-linearities cannot be really ignored. And so that's an increase in productivity that we are trying to save to better manage work-life balance issues and have more flexibility in the work environment. So some of the positive things that the workers would like to have that are more purposeful, people driven more by that than material rewards and so on. So on that note, maybe we could start off the workshop with the discussion of Vahe, who has the first presentation.
Great, thank you very much, Doug. And I will try to stick to my 10-minute limit in this presentation. So we want to talk about the role of human capital in FPAS Mark II, and specifically how we've been thinking about a human capital framework for monetary policy departments and for the Central Bank of Armenia at large. Of course, this is something that we're essentially piloting and implementing at the Monetary Policy Department, but we think this has the potential for implications for how human capital is thought of in the Central Bank of Armenia and central banks globally more broadly. So I want to begin by talking about some of the issues with human capital that we see in central banks around the world today, including the Central Bank of Armenia, but this is, I think, something that'll be familiar to all of you. It's not necessarily specific to us. But it's really an open secret that there are a number of human capital challenges in central banks today. Some of these are things that are just the product of any kind of intellectually intensive work any organization that's involved in that kind of work tends to run into some of these issues, as well as the fact of simply being a large institution, we often run into some of these problems. So what are they? When we look at how kind of mentoring and training is structured, we find that oftentimes our mentoring habits simply aren't where we'd like them to be. That the training that team members receive, in particular kind of new team members and new hires, is kind of superficial at best. We tend to kind of adopt a kind of throw people in the deep end approach and hope they come out swimming. But that oftentimes can cause a lot of kind of undue stress or create a lot of kind of transitional problems with new recruits. We also find that kind of any large scale institution suffers from this problem of there being excessive rigidity and hierarchy. Some of that is, of course, kind of natural and to be expected, again, simply for kind of organizational procedures and so on. But we want to make sure that we don't have these excessive rigidities and hierarchies where they're useful, but where they simply exist for the sake of existing, we kind of want to find ways to eliminate them. And something that's more specific to monetary policy itself is we find that the way that projection rounds tend to be structured under most of the FPAS Mark I central banks is that they're unnecessarily tedious and laborious. Part of that is due to kind of the excessive focus on the baseline scenario and all of the kind of additional work that entails. But part of it is simply that the rounds themselves are structured in kind of very lengthy and inefficient ways. So all of that kind of creates work-life imbalances, and that creates some problems for our team. Some of the problems that might exist, one, is there simply being lower productivity. Some of that might be due to the fact that people tend to be siloed within these excessively kind of rigid hierarchies, and so they become specialists of one specific task. But at the same time, that kind of lowers the overall productivity, and it also kind of eliminates incentives for people to do really well. This, of course, kind of creates stagnation problems in human capital. And of course, within this kind of environment, it becomes really difficult to attract fresh talent or to retain existing talent, simply because people find that they can find other environments where human capital perhaps is structured in a different way, where the incentive structures are a little bit different. And so that becomes kind of a more attractive place to work. And so we certainly want to avoid scenarios like that. The ultimate kind of other idea is that the incentives and the way the incentive structures are set up, it's for people to be simply good enough and to do their job at kind of the minimum level required, rather than kind of seek out opportunities to really take the initiative and try to become truly excellent at what they do. I think that latter point is something that we emphasize a lot. That's kind of an essential ingredient really to running a world-class kind of monetary policy department. So because under Mark II, we're really kind of fundamentally revisiting a lot of the key aspects of what kind of a framework means, this gives us an opportunity to design a human capital system from scratch. So a lot of what we find is simply that, in many institutions, human capital is kind of an afterthought. It's something like the picture on the left, even though that was kind of deliberately designed as such, but you can imagine a type of building where things are pieced together very hodgepodge on top of each other. And that's how we find that human capital is developed. On the other hand, the way we think about it is we're kind of building a rocket or something entirely new from the ground up. And so this gives us an opportunity to really think about what are the fundamental components, what makes for a good human capital system, what are the right incentive structures, what is the right system for training, for development, for mentorship, what are the standards that we should have for people, how should we recruit, what are the principles for kind of diversity and equity that we want to make sure we're adhering to. And so all of these principles, when you think about it from the ground up, it becomes much easier to kind of build something from scratch that kind of adheres to all those principles. So our proposal and the way we've really structured the kind of culture for human capital under Mark II at the CBA is this idea of the dynamic learning environment. And that's really our name for kind of our brand of training and development for our staff. And it's built on a number of principles. The first of which is this idea of commitment to excellence. We want to have all of our teammates kind of firmly adhering to this idea of wanting to become the very best in their field, wanting to become the very best economists, and as kind of maybe a trickle-up effect, wanting to create the very best monetary policy department, wanting to have the very best central bank in the world, and understanding that they play a very important role in that institution building, right? They're not kind of a passive observer of either a good or mediocre institution. They play an important role in creating that institution in their day-to-day work every single day. Every single assignment they complete is part of that institution building process. And so having people kind of commit to this very important principle, we think is kind of the most important foundation and where everything begins. The second thing is based on this idea that I talked about of there being kind of excessive rigidity and hierarchy. We want to kind of get rid of that. And in addition to this idea of there being kind of non-hierarchical approaches to learning. This is based on, I think, a lot of some really good research that's been done over the past couple decades looking at how people actually learn and finding opportunities to tailor learning to people's different styles, but also trying to get rid of this kind of very outmoded idea of there being kind of a simple instructor and teacher or boss kind of employee relationship that tends to govern how training happens in many institutions, and instead having kind of a more flat structure for accomplishing training and development. The next idea is having people that are very self-aware, aware of themselves, aware of people around them and the institution at large. And so this requires a very healthy and robust culture of feedback sharing that happens both organically, as well as sometimes that happens on kind of a more a structured format, right? The latter is how feedback tends to happen in most large institutions, where it's very rigid and formulaic in the sense of during an annual performance review, or when someone kind of very formally requests feedback, that's when you give it. But instead, we're trying to shift towards emphasizing the importance of kind of informal feedback. The last component is global engagement, which for a country like Armenia is particularly important, simply because we're rather small. And so opportunities to engage with a lot of people globally tend to be a little bit more limited, just given the fact that our population is 3 million. And so we need to kind of take the extra initiative all the time to make sure that our staff is given opportunities to engage with people from around the world, like-minded people, such as through this, a good example is this workshop that we're organizing right now, but also in kind of our daily interactions of working with kind of thought leaders and world-class economists from all around the world as a way of making sure that our team is always engaged with the very best in kind of research and analysis and so on throughout the world. In terms of our organizational structure, to return to this idea of kind of eliminating excessive hierarchies, this is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. On the left side of the screen, you see a picture of Marcel Duchamp, who's sitting next to his probably most famous sculpture, if you can call it that, which is known as the Fountain. And that's essentially a urinal that's been put on a pedestal and flipped upside down. And it now kind of stands as one of probably, the most iconic and important works of art of the 20th century. And so this idea is kind of in many ways our inspiration. It's kind of we say this in a tongue-in-cheek way, but certainly no one would consider a toilet to be a work of art, but in the proper context and given the proper treatment, it might very well be. And so in the same way, we might think of kind of rigidity and hierarchy in teams and kind of organizing and structuring people as being something that's not necessarily super desirable. In an ideal world, we'd love to give people kind of free rein to simply do what they want, but we realize that there's kind of an element of necessity to kind of organizing people and having structure within our team. And so we kind of take this approach when we think about what's the right organizational structure for a monetary policy department. And so we've taken kind of the structure of a monetary policy department and very much rotated it and flipped it on its head, where the kind of important, at the top of the page, what you see are kind of the blood of the team, the kind of bread and butter, the kind of most essential components, which are the macroeconomists themselves. And they're structured into these teams, but what you don't see from how it's presented on the screen is the fact that these teams rotate on an annual basis. They're very fluid, so people are constantly moving within teams, and that the lines connecting people aren't simply kind of vertical. They're very much horizontal. People are constantly working across teams and within teams to get projects done. So we have this kind of group of four teams of 6 economists each. So that's about 24 economists, as we think is what's kind of necessary at the upper end to run a monetary policy department. It's also probably possible to do it with fewer, but this allows us to kind of have teams that are each quarter, one team might be focused on running the projection round itself. One team might be doing backup. And having kind of additional teams allows us to focus on really cutting edge research, analysis, framework development, analytical tool development, and so on, while the other kind of teams are involved in the round. So that's kind of the idea of having multiple teams and 24 people involved in the process. Some of the other components that are important in our HR model is this idea of having a very transparent system for kind of evaluating people and certifying them to kind of be qualified to work and do monetary policy. So the idea is that we have, again, the Global Forecasting School is kind of our name and our brand for our training platform. So that's what GFS means. And the idea is that we have a set number of levels that correspond to people's kind of competence and their ability to contribute. So at the lower end, we begin with kind of pre-GFS, which is somebody that wants to join the monetary policy department or wants to get up to the standards that we've set for our team, begins at kind of pre-GFS, and they work their way through the levels. And the idea is that they would have about a year or so on the lower end and 1 to 2 years on the upper end to progress through the levels. On the lower end, they're more focused on kind of production work, actually learning, cultivating skills, doing a lot of like the legwork and the analysis. And then the kind of upper end of the spectrum is more focused on coaching and investing in the staff and kind of helping the team grow. And so the idea is it's very much kind of an upper out model, which is kind of consistent with this idea of having excellence, but also is intended to make sure that people don't kind of stick around here for decades, that within 6 to 9 years or so, they've essentially done all that they can within the monetary policy department, and they're equipped with sufficient skills to go out and find a different job, and making sure that our team constantly stays fresh and rotating is also really important. In terms of how we do this certification for people, we essentially structure this in a way that's very organic and actually very much aligns with our work objectives and our training objectives. And so we try to test for the skills that we think are the most important for economists. So the content is obviously economics, monetary policy, and things like that. But in terms of how the tests are structured, they test for one, kind of oral communication skills, which we call these kind of video interviews. One might imagine that being kind of similar to kind of a job interview, where a very difficult kind of topical economics question is thrown at you, and you must be able to kind of formulate that in a very short amount of time in a way that demonstrates the depth of your knowledge. And that's very clear and easy to understand. It's important because economists, I think we want to avoid this trap where economists are kind of really good at doing the work, but not necessarily good at communicating the work. I think that's the problem of our profession, is we do a very poor job of being able to communicate these ideas to perhaps lay people or even other people in our institution, to be honest. The other component of that, of course, is not just oral, but also written. And so having kind of writing assignments in the form of kind of memos to a governor, memos to another kind of high level official, where you have to be able to kind of within 1 or 2 pages in a short amount of time, really succinctly and clearly capture the essence of an argument. As well as, of course, presentations, which is something that we do a lot. This is kind of something that people are able to kind of score on and receive testing points in a very kind of organic way, just given how often we present. So I want to end with this note, which is talking about, of course, this kind of fluid model of human capital that we have, where we try to, emphasize the idea of people not staying in the department for more than, 6 to 9 years, and constantly having fresh people coming in. Of course, that raises the question of what kind of people do we want to be working on our team, and what kind of people do we want, to apply for our team. And so, of course, we want a mix of hard and soft skills. And we think this is kind of the foundation, or kind of the minimum level of skills that one needs to become a truly good economist. Anything beyond this is kind of a nice to have. But without these skills, without these kind of foundational components, it becomes probably very difficult, to do well in this field, we think. So those hard skills are really having kind of a really solid working knowledge of economics and applied economics, probably at kind of the university intermediate micro macro level. That's probably a good starting point, and we actually sometimes argue that any economics, formal economics training beyond that at a university setting, unless it's done exceptionally well, can actually be more problematic to teaching people really good economics. So that's kind of one of our points of view. We also think it's important to have a strong foundational knowledge of math. And we emphasize the importance of kind of bilingual competency, bilingual at a minimum. So both kind of proficiency in Armenian as well as in English, just given, again, this kind of important pillar of global engagement and being constantly engaged with people from around the world. Of course, the working language for that would be in English, as we're speaking right now. In terms of soft skills, we emphasize the importance of being good communicators, being good critical thinkers, and also having a lot of intellectual curiosity. Being able to wear many hats and handle pressure very well. We do a lot of different work at the monetary policy department, perhaps more than you would think of on paper, and that's partly because we're involved in framework development at the moment, but also because it's kind of an important principle of the work that we do, that we want people to be very, very well-rounded. So the ability, the kind of desire to be well-rounded is important for us. And then from kind of a personality trait point of view, what do we value? These are kind of very qualitative and difficult to measure, but this is kind of the spark that I think is something that allows someone to really excel, and I think become exceptional. And so these include things like having a sense of kind of innate drive and motivation, of being driven by internal factors, of personally wanting to become the best, as opposed to kind of being simply looking for kind of external rewards or somebody patting them on the back. That's also reflected in this kind of psychological term of having an internal locus of control. As a kind of addendum to that, people should also have a high sense of personal responsibility and accountability, and be kind of a true team player. We work in a team setting, and so not being kind of very individually minded, of kind of wanting to take possession of work or things like that, being really, really committed and invested in the people around them. And lastly, and this is most important, this is an idea that was emphasized at the Central Bank of Armenia by former Deputy Governor Yerityan, which is this idea of being willing to make mistakes and failing, and actually having an eager attitude towards failure is probably the most important attribute that someone can have. This is true on, I think, a day-to-day level. It's also true on kind of a broader institutional level, of being open to trying new things, of being willing to fail insofar as you have the kind of right attitude and have the kind of desire to learn from all these things and make yourself better as a result. So I'll stop here. There's certainly more that I could touch upon, but in the interest of time, I'll stop here and I'll turn it over to Evie Trong of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, and she'll perhaps offer her take on what it is they're doing at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. And I'll also just add, because I didn't make this very important shout out, but a lot of what we've been developing at the Central Bank of Armenia is in many ways inspired by some of Evie's stories about how human capital is structured at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. So Evie, it's great to see you, and I look forward to hearing from you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vahe. And Hello and good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. It's always a pleasure. And it's been my privilege, as Vahe mentioned, to take part in a couple of these sessions now. And it's always topics that are dear to my heart. But this one, I think, is particularly timely because currently at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, we are going through a phase of a sort of moderate scale restructure, rethinking about our human capital and what our staffing and structural needs are going to be over the next year or two, having come through the pandemic, having seen some of the deficiencies in the way we were doing things before, we are now looking at what our needs are and making some changes. And I think it's really important in the context of human capital because I doubt we'll be alone with recent reviews of the Reserve Bank of Australia, with the current ongoing review, Ben Bernanke's review of the Bank of England. A lot of central banks are turning inwards, thinking about what they want. And so that means that there's going to be a lot of competition for staff, and there's going to be a lot of emerging ideologies about how you build a central bank macroeconomics department. And so it's going to be a hot topic. And so we think we're doing the right thing by moving now, getting ahead of the curve. And I think that's exactly what's going on here with the Global Forecasting School. The Central Bank of Armenia is also getting ahead of the curve in the sense that we are thinking about building up our human capital internally and working out better ways of working with fewer people. So I will pull up my slides. I have about 15 minutes of presentation prepared, but what I really want is for this session to be fluid and organic. So please interrupt me, ask questions, debate. You can use the hand up symbol. I'll try to watch for that. Yeah, I would much rather spend my time talking about the things that you are most interested in rather than the things that I came here thinking I was going to present. So that being said, here is what I have intended to talk about. I think given the time constraints, it probably makes sense that I spend a little less time talking about the who and the what. Vahe's already done a really good job of explaining what an FPAS central bank needs, who they want in their team, and so some of the kind of ways that you can go about structuring that. I'll focus a little bit more on the how. So I'll give some specific examples of strategies that we're currently using at the RBNZ to build culture and capacity. And I see those things as being very, very much interlinked. So the who only gets you so far. The what, in terms of how you put your team together, your culture, your shared objectives, is really crucial to success. And then how we'll move into some sort of more specific strategies. So starting off briefly with who do we want? Who comes into our good team, our great team? I think a really important context here is that monetary policy departments have huge mandates. So you don't need to read every bullet point on this list. Suffice to say that a central bank monetary policy department needs to be able to develop good advice. It needs to be able to communicate good advice. It needs to be able to do highly technical research, and it needs to be able to do simple communications directly to the public. And that means that you need a really diverse group of people and diverse skill sets. You are never going to find individuals who can do all of these things to exactly the same level. And you are never going to have a department that's big enough that you can have one person per job and one person specializing in each thing. So we've got a really broad mandate and we need a really diverse mix of people. That said, there's a lot of specialization that is required in central banks. The models and frameworks that we use are complex. They require significant training, some of which happens in universities, but much of which doesn't. And even beyond the technical training, every economy has its own legislative and economic environment. It has its own specific needs. And so as a consequence, adaptability and flexibility are the things that I would really prioritize in building a central bank monetary policy department. And I think that's exactly what the Global Forecasting School is doing. So at any point in time, as you guys are very well aware, an economy can be facing huge challenges. And a monetary policy department could be dealing with any of these challenges. And that means that where resource needs to be directed will change through time. You cannot build a team and expect that you will forever have 6 people on producing forecasts, 6 people on backup and 12 people on research. That will never work, as you know. Sometimes it's going to be 12 people on forecasts because the forecasting's gotten really intense. Sometimes it's going to be 6 people on forecasts and everybody else developing and designing a new unconventional monetary policy tool because that's what's needed at the time. Sometimes there will be people responding to legislative changes, specific risks emerging in the economy, or in some cases, even things like negotiation with government. So adaptability and flexibility in our team is what we're chasing. A high level of skill, sufficient specialization, but with a lot of adaptability and flexibility within the group. But as I mentioned earlier, the group is not the sum of its parts. It's much more than the sum of its parts. And so I think when you stop, once you've gotten your really good people, you need to think about now, how do we turn these good people into a good team? And for me, there are 2 key elements of turning good people into a good team. The first and most important one is shared, clear objectives. So you need teams that know what they're trying to do at a deep level, not a superficial level. This is my job and this is what I do today, but a deep level. This is what we're trying to achieve as a central bank, as a monetary policy department, as a forecasting team. And a culture of responsibility. Vahe's talked a little bit about internal and intrinsic motivation. I think that the best motivation you can find is a belief from your staff that what they're doing actually matters and that they are responsible for the decisions of the institution. And so giving people that sense of purpose, that sense of responsibility, that they know their work is important and that they themselves have a role to play in that team, they know what it is. So I think a really important thing to remember when we're trying to develop these shared objectives is that if our team is going to be adaptable, they're also going to be often working outside their comfort zones. And that means that it's easy for mistakes to happen. And so what we need is that to back this up is a solid structure, a collaborative environment, and clear objectives that are articulating as your kind of guiding light. So why are we doing scenarios? What purpose are these scenarios going to be put to? What are the outcomes we're trying to achieve? And that can be at the macroeconomic level, that can be at the institutional level, or that can be at the team level. The important thing is that they're known and they're discussed, and we know why we're here. We know what we're doing, and we have the networks to make sure that nothing falls through the cracks. Another thing that Vahe mentioned quite a lot was this kind of two cultural aspects, which I think are the foundation of a good team, and that's collaborative culture and a high performance culture. So we already talked about diversity and shared vision. The other thing that hasn't been touched on as explicitly in Vahe's talk, but I think underlies it a lot, is this idea of achieving through others. So we did talk about mentoring, we talked about developing other people, but really the way I like to think about that goal is that you actually are achieving those outcomes, you're achieving those goals that you've specified through others. So that is a whirlwind tour of why we're here, of what we're trying to do. Now we'll get more into some of the practical aspects of, well, how does it work at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand right now? And what are some kind of tips and tools and ways that we're going about developing these teams? So Vahe's completely right that size and structure do matter. I don't think it's the case that in an ideal world, everyone would be having free rein and doing whatever they thought was most important. I think along with the shared objectives, a good structure is helpful for ensuring that everybody in the boat is paddling in the same direction, to ensure that we're all going the same way to the same purpose. So I think that with smaller, leaner teams, like the ones you're proposing, you can afford to operate with less structure. And then the bigger the team gets, at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, we are currently looking at expanding our team size. So the bigger your team gets, the more important it is to have more structure. And the purpose of the structure is absolutely not command and control. It's not so that messages can be filtered down or orders can be filtered down or that work can be filtered back up. The purpose of the structure is to ensure that you have a communication network, that everybody has the opportunity to have a touch point with everybody else, but not all at the same time, because here we're proposing a department that's going to have 43 people. That's too many people for everybody to know what everybody else is doing at all points in time. So your structure is your network. Your structure is your way that people stay connected. And it's, again, your safety net to ensure that nothing is falling through the cracks. So between the managers of each team, they should all be able to clearly articulate what needs to be done to meet the objectives and which leader of each team is responsible for making sure that those objectives are met. So this layout that we have here for the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is significantly larger than the layouts we have been working with up until this point. So up until this point, the Reserve Bank has been steady at around about 30 to 33 staff, and this new structure we're envisioning is going to have 43 staff. But that is with a reasonably expanded mandate. We are now legislatively required to do more reviews of our monetary policy, and that will all be done internally. We are now tasked with doing a lot of research on behalf of other parts of the central bank, so not just monetary policy research. That justifies the extra staff in the central bank analysis and research team. And this is also a team that is contemplating the same kind of transformation that's going on in Armenia right now, where we are thinking that we may be looking to develop brand new tools to be implemented. And so we're thinking, how are we going to be able to deliver that? We believe it requires us to have more staff. The way that we've chosen to structure ourselves, rather than have 4 rotating teams, is to have teams grouped essentially by skill set, if you like. And that might not seem very clear from this layout, but essentially we have on the far left our research intensive people. Next over, we have our more production-based people, so people who like to work directly in code, people who like to make sure that systems work. Our forecasting team is the team that delivers the projections, so they are drawing a lot on the modelling and central bank analysis and research team. And then our policy analysis team is responsible for reviews, the speech program, and also delivering advice directly to the MPC in relation to the forecasts. So that's not to say that anyone in any of these teams has a fixed role that they will be fulfilling all the time. Anyone in any team could be fulfilling any job at any moment, but this is how we're going to be roughly grouping it ourselves and reporting. So now I'll jump to probably the fun bit, which is, some practical strategies and tools. What do we do? What do I think all central banks should be trying? And I think if there was one single thing that I would like other central banks to think about a little bit more in terms of developing human capital at central bank, is that people learn best by doing. And so giving staff real responsibility early in their career, for me, is the foundation for this growth mindset and future success. So essentially, my message is use your young people. Young people have so much energy, so much motivation, and are very intelligent. And if you put them into positions that challenge them, then that's where you get the real growth. And that has a really important interplay with Vahe's comments around mentoring and the state of mentoring in many central banks. I think that, yes, mentoring is undervalued. I also think that if we throw a brand new graduate into a challenging task without any support, they absolutely 9 times out of 10 will drown, and it will be horrible for everyone. But I think that the thing we forget is that there are lots of different ways that mentoring can be achieved, and formal training is one important way that mentoring can be achieved. But a more effective way, in my opinion, is mentoring for a purpose. And so this is where we come back to this achieving through others. Yes, there are people out there who love to train new staff and who will put all of their energy into training someone just for the sake of it. But I think it's much more effective to tell that person that their job is to deliver an outcome. So their job is to ensure that this person delivers an incredible presentation to the governor in 3 weeks' time with influential arguments along these lines, and that is their objective. And I think that's something that we do really well at the Reserve Bank. I don't think there is anyone in the economics department who goes more than 10 weeks past their start date without presenting to the MPC. Everybody is required to do difficult things early, and they are supported by people who know it's their responsibility to make sure that those young people succeed. not broadly, not across a whole range of things, but in relation to a specific outcome. And I think that that is probably the most important thing, is to give people a chance to set very high expectations of them and then to give them the support that they need. And the dynamic learning environment that we're building in the GFS, I think, really reflects monetary policy decisions being made this way. It is a real life copy of the best way of making decisions, where you have a lot of people with a lot of skills being funneled through a mouthpiece, essentially, a mouthpiece who is learning, who is growing, who is responsible for the work. I think another important factor here is that the person knows exactly what they are responsible for, and that they are not handed every single tool to do it. So I think it's really important for a young person to be tasked with a challenge and for them to understand it is their responsibility. So they will get the help that they need when they ask for it, and when they reach out to the right people, and when they have the right conversations. And so what we really want to achieve is a culture where people feel very comfortable asking for help, where people understand what their responsibilities are, and where anybody can do any job, essentially. But training is important, and the Reserve Bank takes a slightly different, less intensive approach to training than that's being proposed to the GFS. Part of that is possible because the Reserve Bank has a sort of well-established baseline. We already have a lot of economists who have been working in this space for a while, and we are relatively comfortable with the starting point level, so we don't have this need to train up a whole bunch of new people. But we do still absolutely need training. And for this purpose, we have our Discover program. And the objective of the Discover program is to raise the minimum standard across the bank through shared understanding. So I think this is a divergence from some of the training programs in some places, is that we try to avoid emphasis on making the best economists even better. Everybody wants to be an excellent economist, and everyone should be striving for greatness, but training is not considered a reward. It's not considered an opportunity for the very best person to go even further, because that creates a competitive environment. The goal here for us is really shared understanding and having everybody at a level that anyone can do any job. And the types of programs that we have are broad and varied. They are taught by anyone. So some of these programs are taught by new graduates. Some of these programs are taught by people who have been at the bank for 15 years. Some of these sessions are taken by the chief economist. Nobody is too new, nobody is too young, nobody is too busy. We all take part in training. We cover baseline things, which you might think would be broadly covered in universities, but that's not really the case in New Zealand. We have a broad range of graduates coming in from a broad range of programs, and all of them have got a different starting point. So we need to ensure that everybody knows the basics. We do very institution-specific training, so training on our own forecast system, for example, which is really just getting the know-how to work with the tools that we have that are specific to us. We do broad central banking training. So just because you're a monetary policy person doesn't mean that you shouldn't understand the interplay between your monetary policy decisions and issues like CBDC and macroprudential policy. We all know those have really strong interplay. And then the other thing we do training on is programming languages, because we believe it's important, yes, to give people the freedom and flexibility to use the programming languages that they thrive in, but also that everybody has common understanding, common language, so that they can work more effectively together and that everybody can use everyone else's models. So the Discover program is ongoing. We have anywhere upwards of 8 courses a year, and just about everybody in the bank takes part at different points in time for different purposes. It's been a very long time, for example, since I've taken a programming course, but I quite often take part in teaching and learning in other parts of the courses. I might be learning in a very financial markets focused piece, or perhaps something that's a little bit fringe to me like machine learning, and I might be teaching on something like the core forecasting system. The other fun thing that we're trialling at the Reserve Bank at the moment is a new way of working that we're calling research sprints. So this is a highly collaborative, time-bound approach to research where you have a very narrow, focused goal and a designated sprint leader. The sprint methodology is drawing on the kind of agile sprint scrum frameworks that are really popular currently in software development. The idea is that you have a very narrow time window. Your sprints are usually about 5 days, and a whole project could be 3 or 4 sprints. So very short. It's very collaborative. So you have a group of people where tasks are assigned flexibly based on availability and ability, and not based on certain roles or jobs in the team. You never have someone who's designated as your spokesperson or designated as your writer or designated as your tester. You have a range of tasks which anyone can pick up. And you pick something narrow and achievable. And so the goal should be to get a paper out in this format within 3 weeks or so. This is something that is brand new for us, so we're only in the process of trialing our first one right now, but I think it has a lot of promise in terms of motivating staff, fostering better collaboration, because we do sometimes face difficulties with certain types of collaboration, particularly our most established academics collaborating. They seem to collaborate very freely and easily with other very well-established academics. They collaborate very easily and freely with very junior researchers, but there can be a little bit of a barrier where you have very established academics collaborating with policy people or with people who are kind of further along their research journey. So they're no longer at the research assistant stage and they have very much their own views, but they're also not at that working academia level. So we think this has great potential for organic cross-fertilization of ideas and organic cross-fertilization of skills in a way that we can run safely without committing too much long-term resource. So to sum up where we got to, I think if I want to emphasize anything in the who section, who do we want? We want people who are collaborative and adaptable. What do we need to do to get there? We really need to have clearly articulated goals, and we really want to have a culture of shared responsibility. So it's a type of intrinsic motivation, but it's not just motivation to be the best, it's motivation to do your job well. And then in terms of what can you do? Well, you need to do the training. You should always give people the opportunity to learn on the job and put them in positions that might put them under a little bit of pressure to perform. And you can trial different ways of working and see what works out for your team. I think that it's important to always try to be innovative in the ways of working space. We haven't cracked it yet, but we are committed to having a go at trying a few different things and seeing what works. So I'm very happy to stop there and hand over, or to take any questions, or to be interrupted, tested, probed on any kind of questions you might have about things I said along the way. I'll hand over to maybe Doug or Vahe to mediate that. I think you're on mute, Doug.
Yeah, I think that one of the things is maybe a bit different. Like I think the basic logic that we're following is very similar to what you have, and that shouldn't really be a surprise because you've shown it to us 2 or 3 times, and I think we've adopted all of it. Some of the things that we have are things like trying to understand more about the individuals, like what their natural learning styles are. So we divide them into like theorists and reflectionists and activist jumpers and pragmatists. And that's been really, really interesting because if you can get, for example, some pragmatists that are good at getting the tasks done, and you can get them interacting with the theorists and the reflectionists and the activists, that's good because the process works a lot better because they hit the deadlines better, and there's more effectively coordination because of the pragmatist wanting to get things done, and more efficiently, I would say too, because if you don't have the pragmatists there warning them about the impending deadline, then they all waste their time too much and so on. So there's simple things, but I think knowing the skills now it's kind of amusing because we're trying to get 6 teams or 4 teams, sorry, of 6 people, because we think 6 is really a magic number that you can't manage more than 6. So if you have 12, you have to break it into 2 teams of 6 and whatever. And then of course with the teams of 6, you can do all kinds of things, because a team of 6 could have you know, a critical mass at doing something and achieve excellence. So one of our teams does oil. One of our 6 people team does oil, okay, and that's our responsibility. Now, it doesn't take 6 people to do oil. It only takes 2 people probably every week to keep the oil project going, meaning that the other 4 can go off and handle maybe current analysis during the round or projections and so on. But there's still 2 left that are left to develop our analytical framework for understanding oil markets or more generally commodity markets or bond markets or equity markets or what's going on in the global economy and so on. So we have that's a little bit different. The second thing that we have to be able to figure out what is what's the right mix on the different teams. This one's been funny because we just happened by pure happenstance, because our boot camp in October is males and our boot camp in November is females. And so we thought, well, now that we have all these males and females together, and given our forecast calendar for the next few months, why don't we just think of them as being teams, okay, and as our production teams. And when we looked at them and we thought, wow, these would be 2 great teams that we hadn't really decided to think of them as teams. But what happened there was that the chemistry on the 2 teams was just so magic that we thought, man, these teams would probably work really well as production teams. So the other thing that we have, Evie, that you might find interesting, and people might actually hate there, and maybe that's why they'll find them interesting, is that we have these things called heat reports now. And this is, again, the dynamic learning environment trying to communicate more effectively. And so when we take the 8-hour day, okay, we break it into 4 parts, okay, and they now have to produce a little video, text, research notes, and whatever thing they're working on, whatever little project they're working on. So maybe they're working on a presentation. And so at 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, if that's their task to create that presentation, they have to have a report in assessing the progress of doing it up until 11 o'clock, and then another one up until 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 5 o'clock. Okay. And why do we do that? Because we want to get people into the habit of explaining how they're doing a certain task. Okay. And then of course we want to measure how productive that task is. Okay. So that person can then also contribute to explaining how that task, how the productivity of that task could be improved even more. Okay, so there might be some little tricks that deal with the task, or there could be some productivity that deals with the design of putting the task together and having people collaborate it on. And so we want to have all that stuff documented. So effectively, at the end of the day, we've got documentation, summaries of all the different kinds of work that was done by each individual, how it contributed into the full product. Now, this, of course, reduces claims, false claims of nepotism, because when you can have this level of accountability, you'll have, very good information about the skill levels of each individual person which means that the person managing it can have, again, in our case, Evie, we're trying to do 6 teams, 4 teams of 6 persons. And so we can always move people, for example, if we need to strengthen our team in one particular way because we've got enough depth, we can always shift people around. And so that's an important, very important part about it. Now, it's really funny, Evie, you like this. Under FPAS Mark II, okay, we've been having these interesting discussions because we have 2 teams of one's females and the other one's males. And we've just been joking, like, are females more compatible for Mark II than males? Because we thought that males might have been more compatible for Mark I than non-FPAS and so on. But we've been having some interesting discussions about that. Maybe I'll turn that over to the discussants and let them say what they think. First, we have Anush, who's from HRD, and hi Anush. She has been wonderful finding all the talent that we need, and it would be impossible for us to talk about any of these issues unless we actually had some people to train. So thanks, Anush.
Thank you. I think everything has been said about the teams and the life-work balance, but what I want to add is whoever joins this team should really be mindful of the fact that this is a really conscious journey that they embark on to become true, fully developed economists and be competitive in international markets. This is the this is the very important point that all the team members should be mindful and be committed to this, because this is truly a conscious journey of becoming excellent macroeconomists. And I'm very happy to be a part of all this and to somehow support this. Okay, thank you.
That's a really good point, Anush, and that's something that I actually picked up on Vahe saying as well, that I was really happy to hear, is this idea of wanting to see people move on. So one of the challenges that we talk about at the Reserve Bank is, why can't we retain our very best people? Why is it that our best people always leave? And I mean, the answer is that they go to Stanford, and so they should. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge the value of having somebody arrive in your department, contribute a lot for 7 years, and for several years, sorry, I meant to say, and then move on and do something else that's really important, because it's going to be of huge benefit to your central bank to have a network of capable people all over the world who have, this fond memory of their time at the Central Bank of Armenia. That's not to say that you don't also want to have really high, top quality people working directly inside the bank some of the time, but it's celebrating the success of when somebody comes, spends a good amount of time with you, and then moves on again, is something that I think we need to get better at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. We got all these people saying, why would anybody ever want to do anything else? Surely this is the best place you can be, but it's only going to be the best place you can be for a certain amount of time. And I think that's good and healthy and something that we should celebrate. At the same time, we want to have the pathways for bringing those people back in at points in time where it works for them, so that people can stay forever for those people for whom that is the right career path for them and there is room for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's also a good thing. like having that network is also good because the standards that you set, I think, for like work culture and kind of personal work standards, I think people take that with them wherever they go, right? So it's something that I think has like downstream effects on, I would say, like other institutions in the country, potentially even globally, right? So that can be, I think, particularly good from like an institution building, state building point of view as well.
I think that the other important thing there is the cultural challenge in terms of the motivation, right? So I talked a lot about motivation being about delivering on your objective, about doing your job well, and about helping people, because I think that is one motive that is very cross-cultural. Everybody wants to be good at what they do. But equally, you need to acknowledge that if you're going to be working internationally, that across different cultures, there are different types of intrinsic motivation, some of which are more competitive, some of which are more collaborative, some of which are more about looking the best, and some of which are more about feeling like you're the best yourself. And all of those have their place, and none of them are better than another. But it's about recognizing which ones are present in the teams that you have and how to use that to the best advantage of the team, how to talk to people in their own language, so to speak, how to talk to people in terms of the things that matter to them, and ensuring that you have enough dialogue that you know, because you won't be able to guess.
Yes, another thing to mention is the support that the team members get when they join this team. I think they could tell that too, because whenever whoever joins this team, I mean, is good enough to join this team, gets the full support in terms of training, feedback, mentorship. It's really very appreciated and important.
So maybe we could turn to the students. They're here as well. I can't see them on let me get the picture of them up. So we have Deanna, Leah, Hike, Harut, Hike, who looks like he's not awake yet, staring at his computer, pretending to have a purpose.
It's very early where you are, right?
But we've spent a lot of time, designing this framework for the students, and let's just say that some of the things that we've designed, they like more than others, and so on, such as the accountability tests, which we now renamed the heat tests. But we could talk about that. But we could also talk about just some of the experiences that we've had where we developed two groups, one males and the other one females. And so I just asked the females group yesterday, what were their views? Do they think that females have an advantage or a disadvantage under Mark II relative to the old way of doing it under Mark I, and even before that, non-FPAS central banks? So Deanna, maybe you could take it, and then maybe Leah could lead, and maybe Harut and Hike and Vahe could chip in.
I'm also here tagging the Zoom.
Oh, you're here? Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
of course.
Okay, Shohei, why don't you ask you? Males and females, what do you think about this? Should they be put in different groups? When we think about what the steady state is going to look like, and we have 4 teams of 6 people, there'll be 24 people. Okay. Now that we've taken down all the restrictions, okay, in the design of FPAS Mark II, okay, where there's no more bias against females or anybody that wants to have a life, in other words, work-life balance issues. what do you think the optimal composition of the team should be in terms of males and females?
To have the separate teams is also interesting, but for after, I think that the team with both with a male and female will be much more productive, because both sides can give their positive and strong. Yeah, I think that it should be mixed and not just separate. But now our oil team is composed. It's something amazing. It's composed only by women, of course, with coaching of you and Jared. And we in these last 2 weeks, we have started in these last 2 weeks, and we have already done a great deal. And having no man in our team doesn't stop us to do great things.
Okay, so we had 6 people, okay, on one team, and then we have another 16 that's our projection team, and it's mainly males, okay. And so the question is, does that look, when you just look at those 2 teams and you look at the skills, those 6 people for projection and developing, they look like they're pretty strong. You look at the team that Shohei said, which is about, in the short run, current analysis and supporting the projection. That looks pretty darn strong, okay? And so one can imagine a team or a system where they do the job for 6 months, and then after 6 months they rotate, they switch their jobs, okay? And everybody knows that beforehand, so that everybody virtually starts training with the people in the other team, okay? Now when we say that we have these 2 teams, we also have a lot of collaboration between different members of the team, okay? So right now, for example, yesterday we had Shohei working with High K2. These are very young people, so this would be like the coach, the buddy at the Reserve Bank in New Zealand, if you want to think about it that way. And they were working, they pulled off a project outside of their regular teams, and that wasn't any problem whatsoever, because the critical mass on each team is 6. And so when we're not in the middle of a projection cycle, then having a team of 6 is good, because 2 of them can be handling the production responsibilities, and the other 4 can be working on projects, either collaborating amongst themselves or collaborating with somebody else and on the other teams and so on. So we like that flexibility. Seems to be nice to get the people at the right places. But Lev, you're looking in, and I'm sure that you're always inquisitive and have lots of questions and stuff.
Yeah.
And
Yes, Doug. I heard a lot about the motivation today, and the setting goals, clear objectives, and I want to raise a question. When we set the goals for people and try to evaluate the performance, we all have some theories of motivation in back of our minds. So I wanted to open discussion about the motivation, and especially motivation. What is a motivation theory for us? People are not explicitly open what motivate them, and we have two different type of theory. One of these theories is let's say it's a theory of economists. It's about that people are more lazily and they work hard and excel only in case of incentives, only in case of financial benefits or any kind of benefits. But on the one extreme, it's a economic view of motivation, and by their model, people are driven solely by they wanted to hide information. They not tend to share it because they want to use their personality and personal gain. But but what we discover and what is our belief in case of motivation and what we try to shape in uh, this framework for especially for FPAS Mark II as a human capital motivation reasons, we think that people are also they are needs to contribute. They want to do right things. They are achievement oriented, and of course, people are like to innovate. So in this from this point, and the point what Wahid told us about the main pillars of this framework. By this framework, we unleash the innovation. We break the blocks, the organization blocks for people who can contribute, because the contribution, the let's view the feedback as a tool for contribute. Feedback as a habit also helpful for sharing ideas, to contribute what you know, to share with your colleagues. And it's a very powerful tool for for shaping the health organizational culture. And of course, when we talk about another pillar that we don't afraid from making mistakes, what it's help? It's helpful for innovation, because it's unleash innovation. You never can get innovation from culture when making mistakes it's terrible, and it's problem. We say you can try, you can learn by doing, and so by this culture we unblock, we unleash innovation of people. So I want to one time underline that, well, for us, for our point of view, we believe that four things are important, and these four things are motivate peoples, and they are not extrinsic, they are more intrinsic motivators. They are people tend to innovate, people want to contribute, people always want to do right things, and in this from this point, I think that to do right things in case of monetary policy, it's always suitable, because they know that their efforts, their goals are for public, are for society. And of course, the fourth point is achievement oriented. And we know that we have 6 levels of, let's say, human capital cycle, and these levels, they are the criteria that when you enter this cycle, you know what is your achievement can be. So when you enter this cycle, it's one of criteria that you are a person who have a achievement oriented mindset. So I will ask the open question. What do you think? What is the best theory of motivation?
I mean, I think for me, motivation is a very complex thing, and it's not static. A person doesn't come with an inbuilt sense of motivation that's unchangeable. And so that's where culture comes in, because culture can play a big role in changing the way that people are motivated. Self-interest can't be separated from the person. Self-interest exists. But what you can do is you can direct that self-interest. So some people feel good when they help others. Some people feel good when they feel they're doing the right thing. Some people feel good when they get paid. Everybody has all of these responses inside them at the same time. There's not just one thing that motivates people. And so your goal as a leader is to align the incentives, is to bring these things together and to enforce good motivation habits. So doing things like you're doing right now, saying achievement motivated people are successful over and over and over again, helps people believe that they should be achievement oriented and that will make them successful. It aligns their intrinsic motivation with their own self-interest and with the group self-interest. And that's much more effective and powerful than trying to pick a certain one and say, this is the one that we're going with and we can't change it. And these are the people we're working with. So I think acknowledging that all of those motivations exist together, acknowledging that you can affect how I'm motivated, but also that I'm going to come with a starting point that might be different to yours, and trying to bring as many of those things into a line as once is what a leader can do to really ensure that their team is all moving in the same direction. And so I think at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, where we've landed, which is not where everybody else in the world is going to be exactly the same and have the exact same beliefs and feel the exact same way, is we have a culture that's highly collaborative. And so a lot of us feel like we're doing well because other people are grateful that we're doing well, because we have one goal together and we feel really good when we contribute to that collective goal. And so that's what we've galvanized ourselves around. And that's an important part of any group. But other groups can just as effectively galvanize themselves around achieving excellence, around doing good for society, around, whatever it is that's your rallying call. The important thing is that you have some and that you're talking about them often. I think that's what helps establish good motivation.
Okay.
For us, it's much more straightforward because of the striving for excellence, because that is the dominant objective here. This is all about finding people that are purpose-driven people. Okay, you almost need to have those kind of people that enter this thing where you're striving for excellence on a level where you want to open up all kinds of doors in the future and so on. And some of those doors might be for money, okay, because there will be big money for these people if they do strive for excellence. But they can also then use it to better manage work-life balance constraints. So in other words, they can negotiate better terms, and of course then make sure that they're continuing to do what they love, which is having purpose in their work life. Because I mean, when it comes right down to it, the happiest people at work are the most productive people, right? So it all comes down to lining. It sounds like what you have me do is you kind of you have some criteria for bringing them in, and then you work with them then. And I guess what we do is we're possibly even much more stringent in terms of letting the new people in, making absolutely sure that these are purposeful people. Now, we're a little lucky there, okay, just because Armenia is not in the greatest place right now. And so we have a lot of younger people, diaspora, that are coming back, and because of the war, they want to do something to help rebuild the country. So now you have this combination of these incredibly talented young people that want to get involved, and they learn at lightning speeds relative to everyone else, because they don't have to be managed by trying to motivate them to work a different way. They're totally motivated to learn as much as possible and to get and to take on as much responsibility as possible. So I think we possibly have so we have more advantages than we have disadvantages. I know that being in Armenia, most people think that that's not a very good thing to say to people, because they like to think of it as disadvantages, but I actually think we have lots of advantages here, that many other central banks that have bureaucracies and histories and things like that. But anyway, we'll find out in a year or two, once the system is implemented and so on. Anybody from the group? Hike? There's 2 hikes out there, and Leah has been very quiet. Is there anyone else out there that would like to say something? Preferably a little controversial, like the discussion I had yesterday, that suggested that the girls' team was good for some things, and the males' team was good for something else. And then, of course, there was a little bit of debate on the girls' team whether or not that view was a consensus and so on. Are you awake, Deanna? Like, are you going to come into this, or you decided that you're leaving this one at home?
And thank you for this thought-provoking question. I just remember that when I started my work, I was in a room with 6 women, and we managed to discuss all things during one day and did our work at the same time. And after that, I moved to Dilijan and I started to work with men. And anytime when I asking them some question, they stopped their work and they started to answer my question. They couldn't manage to answer and work at the same time. So I limited my energy and I saved them. So yesterday I mentioned that I think that for some part of works, guys are better, and women have different skills. We are more productive, we are more responsible, and it makes in some sphere us equal to men. But in general, Doug, I thought about this issue during this night, and I think that maybe the balanced group is better than, I don't know. Now it's funny to have just girl team in our oil project, but maybe in some part we will need guys also with us to be more productive and to achieve higher level. So at this point, that's all. I think my colleagues can add their experience also.
Yeah, I think Leah disagrees with you completely, don't you, Leah?
And thank you for the question, and thank you, Diana. But I think that it's important to approach to work without gender bias. And I don't think that women are smarter or men are smarter, but I think that both girls and boys can bring valuable perspectives and skills to any team, because the effectiveness of team and effectiveness of person depends of the some factors, for example, from the environment, on collaboration, on communication, and what matters most is creating a positive and inclusive work environment so everyone can feel themselves valued and respected. And in our team, my personal experience is that except of being a economist, also I am a mother, and as in our team people are apprehensive, and it means that all people, boys and girls, are apprehensive, so I can work from home, and even I can join in our Zoom meetings with my child. So in terms of boys and girls, I think it's important to approach work without gender bias. Maybe others can add something.
Angela.
Hi, everyone. So I know that I'm not the best person to talk about psychology when we have Vahe in our team. So, but maybe Vahe can continue my thoughts. So I think when we talk about psychology of a team member and a team in general, so we need to understand one thing. So everybody wants to be an outstanding worker. Everybody wants to be special in our team. So what's your job as an institution? So your job, I think, as an institution is to make people feel that the things that they do are very, very important for not only your institution, but also for your country in general. And in these terms, like what we do in our team, we don't just create specialists, we create superstars. So everybody is a superstar in our team. And why is it like that? Because everybody is unique. Everybody has like different sets of skills, and we can't compare one person to another because of how unique they are. So I think this is very important, like aspect of being motivated all the time, because you know that you're needed by your institution. So I think maybe Vahe can continue my thoughts. So Vahe, what do you think?
No, I'll only say that I've been typecast as a psychologist despite having only taken 6 psychology courses as an undergrad almost 10 years ago. So not sure how that happened. I agree. I think like I'll actually agree with everything everyone has said. The idea, Angela, that you need to feel valued by your institution is very important. The inverse, I think, is also true. Like what I always like refer back to is this idea. I think that people tend to think that like institutions exist outside of people, that they're kind of some like predetermined kind of God-given thing that exists. It's some structure that you simply walk into and you take for granted as it is. And people forget that, institutions are built on a daily basis by people. They're composed of people, the leadership making, the ultimate decisions. In the case of Armenia, kind of 30 plus years ago, to actually found these institutions and build them and develop them, right? These were people making decisions. And so when we think of institutions as people, right? I mean, this is a very kind of fundamental, simplistic concept, but I think it has a lot of bearing on how we actually execute our work on a daily basis, right? In the sense of if there's something that isn't palatable or desirable in an institution, I think before even kind of complaining about the institution, I think every person has a responsibility and an onus to actually try to do everything they can to change something about it, right? And I mean, like, this is like, it almost sounds silly, right? In the sense that you hear a lot of platitudes to this like, this is a common platitude that people will say of like, oh, if you don't like something, then change it. But I think when it comes to something like, again, for for a country like Armenia, as Doug mentioned, I think we face the number of challenges like our country faces in probably a week is what many other countries will face in a decade. And so for that kind of context, I think viewing institutions as something that's the responsibility of kind of every employee, every citizen, every person in the country, and that's something that we have to work to build every day, is something that's incredibly important. And if we lose sight of that, I think we run into a lot of dangers.
I'd quite like to just jump in.
I'm just downloading the brochure from the boot camp, okay? Because I thought you might have some idea about what they're being put through. So you have to spend a month. And so we have two teams. One team is coming in October. But this is what they're doing. So it's a 20-day boot camp, and they do a lot of stuff, but it is a very hectic schedule. Okay, like they're working as a team. It's amazing if you put the right people together and they're working together. In this case, they're working 11-hour days. So this is what their actual day turns into. And it's also been designed so that when there's something that's a production task going on at the bank in Diligent, they exploit the time differences and basically try to provide a little support of output, effectively turning the people's days in the central bank into 11-hour days because of a difference in our time zone. So we can deliver stuff to them so that when they wake up in the morning, they will be pleasantly surprised by how the project had improved over time. And of course, it also allows them to basically experience a little bit about the Algarve. Okay, so they play basketball every day. They swim every day. So they do a bunch of activities. And while they're swimming, they get to talk to Giannis and ask him about all the greatest papers in macroeconomics that weren't just written in the last 2 years, but over the last 100 years. Okay, papers that many of these people would not have been exposed to and need to be exposed to be a complete macro economist. So I just wanted to say that our training program is designed to deal with many of these of issues, either to sort them to find out the ones that are compatible with what we're doing, or to train them once we've identified them. So that's what we've been doing there. Hike, I think I need to ask you a question, and the reason is because all of the design of everything has been guided by you, okay, about what you'd like this team to look like. And it would be really interesting to get Evie's response to some of the things that, so the teams that I've been talking about, like the 4 teams of 6, at the end of the day, Hike wants to be able to move the people on these teams around as he sees fit. He wants maximum flexibility to be able to change these people. And again, for hitting all the objectives of making sure that there's a training program always going on, that there's a couple of teams that are really focused on the quarterly projection, that there's a couple of teams that are focused on doing state-of-the-art research, okay, and also possibly supporting the quarterly projection if they have something relevant for that. So, could you maybe just add a few words and maybe close? And Kate, there's another Hike. There's 2 of them. He's one of the coaches that's another secret that we have, Evie, is the people like Hike and like Hike. We don't let them go to board meetings, okay? And you might say, why the hell would you not let the guys that know the most go to board meetings? And the answer is because nobody young will have the opportunity to talk in board meetings if people on the board realize that Heike is there. So Heike is a coach that basically gets all the young people ready, to go to board meetings and so on. Okay, so of course, and he backs them up and so on. So Heike and Heike, tell us what you think about this.
Okay, I will start. Yeah, thank you very much, first of all, for the organization of this workshop again and again and again, and also I invite everyone just to contribute to all the panels and the discussions, because I think that during those workshops will be the idea of having these workshops in a more frequent on a more frequent basis, like on quarterly basis, is especially in this period when we are developing this new framework, is important to share the ideas and also to get contribution from all our colleagues and our counterparts, friends, and guys from different parts of the world. So with regard to the HR model, actually, I wanted to highlight a few things there. Of course, Deb mentioned one very important part of having 4 teams of 6. And the idea, and I want to stress a few principles that we put under the development of the model. The first one is the sustainability, because what we were facing, obviously facing in our monetary policy departments, and I guess this is also true for many central banks as well, is that we most of the time and sometimes rely on certain skills of the people, and also certain roles of those people they can play in certain positions. And of course, there are always questions of sustainability of this model when these people are leaving. And then we are facing problems. For example, real sector guy is leaving, and with all the information and all the knowledge and all the skills with him or her, and then we have quite challenging times just to integrate another new person or train another new person to take this role. That's why. So the key idea that we are trying to incorporate into this design of the new model is exactly that part, the sustainability of the system. And with that we have this fully compatible and fully comparable teams of 6, when we have 6 people exactly having the same knowledge, basically acting as full-fledged macro analysts. So no sectoral, no kind of skill-based or level-based kind of differences there. And that's the idea of training and engaging all those people exactly in the same job that we are doing. So for example, the 6 people will be working on projection, the other 6 will be helping, the other 2 teams of 6 will be working on development and also state-of-the-art, doing state-of-the-art research. And the next round, the teams will switch, which would mean that everyone will have the same opportunity to work on the projection, on the research, and on the supporting and doing some analysis at the same time. So this is the idea without separating, and why we are doing exactly because of the sustainability reason. The second point that I want to highlight in this, and also I would like to invite everyone to comment on that part, because this is very important. When we are talking about the performance management and performance system in general as a whole, there are 2 approaches there. One is based on the level of the production or the productivity that the people or the performance basically we are talking about the level of the performance when people can perform at certain standards and can do certain things. And the second model that we are valuing here is again about the sustainability and about the development, is the slope. So our system is based on the slope rather than the performance level. In that sense, okay, there's 2 approaches could have different implications. That one could be better in certain episodes, in certain circumstances, another will be better in another. But what we value here the slope, which would mean that the performance will not be measured based on the level of the performance at this point, but how what kind of slope this or that person basically showed during while doing this job in a certain period of time. So that's another thing that is important basically to discuss, and it's important to hear also some views from our colleagues, and especially Evie, what she thinks about that. So this is another thing that I wanted to highlight and invite people to discuss. And finally, the third point that I want to mention, which is related to all these two together, what we want, obviously we have discussed that a little bit, what we want to have here people who can, when they leave the central bank, they will have more opportunities and more chances to get their place in their career, rather than the central bank seeing their only opportunity and or their only place to reside. That's an idea which is kind of a transformative somewhere, and Anush is here, and also transformative for the central bank as a whole, because usually what we wanted previously, we wanted to keep people like by all means, right? Because we didn't want to lose our best guys, our superstars, as Angela mentioned. But what we are now changing, and this is really transformative, that we don't want people to stay with us. We want people to move up, to move faster, and then leave, because that's the idea of another dynamic, I would call another dynamic. We in all our places we can see this dynamic world. This is another dynamic thing that we value as well. So these three, of course, there are multiple other things that Vaya mentioned, and we can also, if we have time, can discuss. But these three things I would like to stress, and especially with the second point about the slope part rather than the level part, I would like to hear also from our colleagues and friends. Thanks.
Thanks, Angel. So yeah, I just want to emphasize that what we are doing here is we are creating opportunities basically for individual developments, and the HR model that we employed, in addition to the sustainability and other reasons that I mentioned, is first of all beneficial for individual developments of the workers here. Basically, we are like pushing hard on the weakest skills of the employees, and this rolling responsibilities, like create the environment where they can develop like and rise quite fast here. So yeah, I think that's very important, and basically we are doing everything to create opportunities for rising faster and leaving the bank, as I mentioned.
And one thing with the gender issues, sorry guys, one thing with gender issue, I think that with this experiment that we were doing there with this girls team and boys team, and this is basically was the motivation for the Nobel Prize. The last Nobel Prize we are contributing to the job that Claudia Goldin actually did and got a Nobel Prize. But basically, this could be a good experiment to support this Nobel kind of papers and Nobel jobs.
So just so you know, Evie, everybody works in rooms now, right? So so that girl team works in a room, and we can see them when we are looking at basically an analysis of what's going on in all the Zoom rooms. Okay, and that room is talking continuously. Okay, like and when you go into that room and listen to what they're talking about work, and they're talking, there's not just one person talking, like there's much more of a dialogue in the girls' room than in the other rooms. Okay, which we thought was kind of interesting research. So they seem to be cooperating more and getting work done, hitting deadlines, and so on. So we just thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, the boys are kind of late. They're trying to push things too far. They're constantly having issues with getting their accountability reports in on time at 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Whereas the girls understand what those accountability reports are, and they do them in a way that increases their productivity. Okay, so I don't, so we're still, yeah. Now we put in a male into the girl team. Okay, so it's not exactly, it's not going to be the same next week as it is this week. Okay, so let's see if that has any changes. But okay, so wonderful. Any other discussions that you would like Heike or anyone else for us to explore, or Evie? Can
I maybe just come back on a couple of things that Heike touched on in general, and also this conversation around the girls' teams and the boys' teams. I think the most promising thing that I'm hearing in this conversation is that the central bank is trying things. And I think that's the approach we're taking at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand as well, is that you'll never know if you don't give these things a go. And so I'm all for trialing different ways of working. I think that a lot of the things that Heike talked about sound quite left field and controversial, but they're actually not that much further away from how we currently operate effectively at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. They absolutely are further along the spectrum in terms of full replaceability, you know, having these teams where everybody can do everybody else's job at all times. But at the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, we're currently at a place where I don't think we've had a single model operator, so the person who pushes the final buttons on the forecast, who's done that job for more than 6 quarters in a row in the last 5 years. I don't think there's a single person in the forecasting team, which is our projections team, who has been in that job for longer than, say, 2.5 to 3 years. But what we do have is we do have mechanisms for building and retaining institutional knowledge. So I think it's really important not to throw out the window the value of experience. And that's why I was interested to hear when you're talking about reward and remuneration and the difference between rewarding someone at their level versus their slope. I think one of the things that you should think about is trying to find opportunities to recognize people's value add, not on a KPI against a specific objective, because we know all of the problems. You've already described all of the problems that has. People start working to their job description. People get stuck in their roles because they get really good at doing one thing. They lose the flexibility. But how do you reward and acknowledge advanced contribution in the way that people achieve through others, in the way that people use their experience to innovate more effectively because they've had more time doing different things? For example, somebody who might be doing their first projections round but has extensive research experience that they are able to apply in this context that somebody who had a pure forecasting and projections background might not be able to do, or somebody who is an expert public speaker who's able to translate some of the work that you're doing into, you know, more powerful speak better than anybody else in the team. So I think that's something to think about in addition to the slope, is actually rewarding that flexibility, rewarding experience and institutional knowledge being applied in a non-standard way. There's something that we're working on at the Reserve Bank as well. And it's not something I think that we've mastered. Ours mostly comes through peer review because we, as I've mentioned, are a mostly collaborative oriented bank. But you guys need to work out what's going to fit best for you. Similarly, with the gender diversity in the teams, I think saying that you're designing a framework that girls are better at than boys is running the risk of doing the exact same thing that happened with Mark 1 backwards. You know, instead of design, and with Mark 1, there are a lot more men in the workplace than women at the time, particularly in economics. And so a system was designed to suit those men. And then those men worked hard to be good at the system that they were already in. And I think if you start trying to separate or focus too much on the way that the girls are thriving only, then you run the risk of developing a system that benefits that group better and focuses only on what those girls are bringing and not on what's being achieved through whatever kind of quiet motivation that's underlying what's going on in the boys team. So I think the best thing to focus on is diversity and really rewarding people for bringing each other up and helping each other operate in modes and stages that they're less comfortable in naturally. So yeah, I think lots of really cool things that you're doing and lots of really interesting things for you guys to think about going forward. It's very exciting.
I think basically just this team of girls and this team of boys, I think it was just a thing that we just looked at it and said, this is interesting. And then, of course, almost instantly, the girls started working with the boys. So there's collaboration across the groups. So it, yeah, so it's, I doubt that the final design will look like something like that. It will be based on what their skills are but we'll always be looking, I think, for the chemistry. We do have some good chemistry now. So it just happens that, you know, having a team where the people care about themselves on the team is the way for them to give feedback to each other. That's how the team chemistry works, right? They drive themselves and they give feedback to each other and they enjoy each other's company. Okay. And because they have trust of each other, they accept the feedback. And so that's, yeah, but yeah, you might not see the male and female group next time. In 3 months, it might be different, but let's see where it goes. Okay. So Vahe, did you have any closing thoughts, or Angela or Hasmek hasn't said anything, or should we move on and close up this session?
Yeah, nothing for me. I think we're a little bit over what we promised we would do, so appreciate everyone sticking online for the discussion. We'll be back at 6 o'clock Armenia time, so that's in 7 hours from now in whatever part of the world you're in. And so we'll have our next panel discussion focusing more high level on the monetary policy framework for FPAS Mark II overall.
And Shohei now is going to be taking this and summarizing what was said here, so that we can pass it to the next session at 6 o'clock. Okay, so thank you everybody, and thanks Sevi especially for joining us today, and Lev and Artek. Nice to see you. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, team. Good luck. Have fun with the rest of your sessions.